One.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Finance Friday on the ARCUK network. I'm Hard Money Jim, and it's Veterans Day in the USA. So for all you fellow veterans out there, thank you for your service, and may your country be worthy of your patriotism. So here in Jackson Hole, in Wyoming, winter has come to us quickly, kind of like Hemingway said, bankruptcy came gradually, then suddenly. So I'm going to share my screen here and just going to have to show you just a few photos here. So you see that it looks like I live in Siberia. That's the first elk of the season that showed up in my backyard about a week ago, and she looks pretty healthy. And she'll get joined by about 10,000 of her closest friends here in another few weeks. And along with the coyotes and the wolves that we call the cleanup crew that take care of the weak ones. Only the strong survive. And this is a photo I took out of my backyard just a week later. That's this morning, where it was 0 degrees Fahrenheit and minus 18 degrees centigrade. So anyway, that's enough for the weather. See if I can stop share. I'd like to, enough for the weather report. I'd like to introduce two very special guests today, Maria and Eduardo Marty. And some of you may know Maria as a very dedicated intellectual activist in Latin America. Her brother Eduardo, whom I am meeting for the first time today, is a professional economist. Maria and Eduardo are from Argentina, and therefore they have extensive experience in a very inflationary economy, chronically inflationary. So I asked them to come visit with us today to tell us how they cope with chronic inflation and some of the other inconvenient aspects, I guess you would say, of life that usually accompany an inflationary economy. And I think they have a lot to teach us because, most of this audience is in the US and the UK, and it could happen here. So Maria and Eduardo, welcome. And I wonder if you would please introduce yourselves and tell us just a little bit about your work before we get into our inflation discussion. So Maria, can we start with you?
For sure. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the invitation, Jim. I'm glad to have met you like 3 years ago or 4 years ago, because you were one of the guys who helped me to fund the Ayn Rand Center Latin America. So about my story, well, I think Eduardo is another very good intellectual. In fact, I learned so much from him. I studied communication in Argentina, but I always feel very attracted about ideas, more specifically about philosophical ideas, and I would say more specifically about Ayn Rand's ideas. I met Rand when I was 16. I read ARCUK and I felt completely in love with her ideas. And after that, I read almost all her bibliography. I'm sorry for my English, all her bibliography. And I started promoting her ideas from very young in some informal way until 2015. I started an objectivist club to start reading her books and trying to promote her ideas with the young people. But then I realized that I was navigated in the surface. So I really need to go deeper. So I registered for the OAC, the Objectivist Academic Center provided by the Ayn Rand Institute. And I go through this program, 3 years program in philosophical ideas. And after that, I had the luck to meet Tal Stefani in one of the ARCUK, and I introduced myself, he introduced himself, and he said to me, Maria, what we can do for Latin America? And I said, the only way that we can make it better is to start promoting good ideas and promote Ayn Rand's ideas. And then he said, okay, let's do it. Let's start the Ayn Rand Center Latin America. And that was in 2019. And since then, I'm doing that. I'm the president of the organization, and I'm trying to do my best to try to spread good ideas and try to change the politics and the economics that you will describe for surely now, you and Eduardo, but trying to change the philosophical ideas. So that's what I'm doing right now.
That's great. We're lucky to have you, Maria. Eduardo, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. You want me to tell you a little bit about me?
Yes, sir. Your work, and I noticed from your email handle that I think the suffix on your email handle is Freelatam.
Right. I studied at the University of Buenos Aires, and I'm a public accountant. After that, I followed that career, but because at that time, the guerrilla boys were in charge of the University of Buenos Aires, so you couldn't learn anything but Marxism at the university. So I decided to follow a technical career like accounting. But after that, I decided to go to study economics. That at that time, that was what I wanted to study. So I chose to study under Hans Sennholz's guide, who was a student of Ludwig von Mises. I don't know if you remember, Mises ran the PhD program at NYU, organized by Leonard Reed, and his main students were Murray Rothbard, Israel Kirzner, and one of them was Hans Sennholz.
And one was George Reisman too. Yeah,
George Reisman too. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And Sennholz was offered being the dean of the Department of Economics at Grove City College, and because a deal between Howard Hughes, do you remember the aviator, and Leonard Reed, and he went there. And he was invited to Argentina by the Argentinian Chamber of Commerce and Mr. Venegas Lynch. And Sennholz, the first one to come was Ludwig von Mises. You are talking in 1969. But after Mises, Friedrich Hayek came a couple of times, Milton Friedman, Hans Sennholz. And when Hans came to Buenos Aires, he offered scholarship for one Argentinian a year. So I was the second one in going. The first one was Alex Chafuen, who was running the Atlas Economic Research Foundation for several years in Washington. I was the second one. And well, after studying with Hans, we learned free market economics. When I came back to Buenos Aires and became a professor at the University of Buenos Aires, teaching free market economics at the law school for several years. And after that, I was hired by Universidad Francisco Marroquín in Guatemala, run by Manuel Ayau. He's a very famous, was because he passed away, but he was a very famous libertarian for years. I taught there for several years until I received a scholarship, a Claude Lamb scholarship, to work at the Institute for Humane Studies with Marty Zupan and John Blondell. And I was trained to organize a non-for-profit organization. And after thinking a lot, I created Junior Achievement in Argentina. Junior Achievement is a non-for-profit, the oldest, biggest, and fastest growing entrepreneurial organization in the world. They have a K-12 program, very good one. And I started Junior Achievement in Argentina in 1990 and ran it for 30 years. Helped to start Junior Achievement in Chile, Paraguay, Brazil, and Spain. And it's a good program. I thought that was a good idea to teach Latin Americans that poor are poor not because of the rich are rich, but to show them the process of wealth creation. You in Americans say, to make money. That concept is not very well understood in Latin America because of the Spaniards, the commercial monopoly, and all the institutions they created. They were autocratic institutions and very collective thought with the church and the sword. So with Junior Achievement, I intended to teach wealth creation through the Junior Achievement Company and other projects. These are the ones who started with sentences like, go for it. Impossible is nothing. Just do it. The beginning of the junior achievement companies. You give the kids 15 weeks without capital, without raw materials, without nothing. They are forced they are challenged to organize a company. And in 15 weeks, they have to make money. So they choose a product, they organize the marketing, they organize the financing, the human resources, they pay salaries, and after they raise capital at the stock exchange of Buenos Aires. They were selling stocks, and after 15 weeks, what they do is they show you the results. So they can see, just not from an intellectual point of view, but just from a practical point of view, that thinking, if you think properly, deeply, and you just think in terms of trying to help consumers to reach their goals, you can make money out of it. So
that's real. They're learning real wealth creation. Real wealth creation. Yes. Very
nice. So I worked for 30 years. I retired and started a new organization called Foundation for Intellectual Responsibility. I developed a course on free market economics. It's 60 videos in Spanish, translated into English, short videos, the type of free to choose. But I think I like very much the pedagogical style I could use in, and I'm working right now spreading out free market economics around Latin America. Right now I'm in Lima because tomorrow I will be delivering a seminar on free market economics. And also I try to help Maria in her efforts to spread out objectivist ideas and Ayn Rand ideas. I'm also a fan. I read all her books, and I couldn't follow a career, just a professional career understanding objectivist principles, but I think that I took time to read and take a look to all the videos by Leonard Peikoff, and I read all Ayn Rand books too, and several other intellectuals that I really like it. So I try to explain a little bit. You
do it very well.
I try to explain a little bit of objectivist philosophy too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is probably the most pleasant surprise I could have. I didn't know Maria had a brother, and I didn't know he was such a powerhouse and such an advocate.
This is nice to hear, because I always been the little sister. So now it's good that some he's the brother. So I like it.
That is great. Thank you for the introduction. And so let's kick off this discussion on inflation with some numbers or some issues in Argentina. And I'm going to start that off by, over 20 years ago, I was a financial analyst with a U.S. investment firm. I was a banking analyst. We invested internationally for our clients. And one of my tasks was to analyze Banco Galicia in Argentina, the largest privately owned bank in Argentina. And this was in 2001, I believe, 2000 or 2001. And the context was that Argentina had undergone recently, in the past 8 or 10 years prior to that, some currency reform, so that the peso had traded almost in parity all the time with the dollar. And so our clients were interested in these investments. So I looked at Banco Galicia, and I noticed right away that the balance sheet was stuffed full of Argentine government sovereign bonds. And I quickly realized that what was happening is that the government was funding their expenditures by stuffing these bonds into the banking system. And this is very relevant for this program, because my interest in this program and my Substack Hard Money Gym is called Money Creation and Its Consequences. And as constant listeners and readers know, to this broadcast, banks create money when they purchase assets, particularly loans, They create brand new money, and what they were doing is creating brand new money for the government to spend on its mostly unproductive projects, which is something that many, many governments do. So, CPI inflation at the time I noticed was high, but the government, the central bank was able to keep the peso and the dollar at parity for a while. And I didn't understand how they were able to do this, but I didn't have to wait long, because 1 year after I did this, the peso went from 1 to 3.5 to the dollar. And any people who had put their faith in a stable peso were very disappointed. So what I want to do here is just go through some real quickly, and I want to get back to both of you. Let me see here. If I can make my screen go forward here. Here we go. These are the things we'll talk about today, but what we have here is money supply growth in Argentina from 1990. Currently, the latest numbers I have is that the M2, the broad money supply growth in Argentina, is 9.4 trillion pesos. In 1990, it was 711 million pesos. That's over a 32-year period, an average compound increase, the way I calculated it, of about 35% annually, which is astonishing. And these are the kinds of numbers that you usually see only in, astronomy class, not in economics class. Here's some snapshot numbers. I told you the peso, actually 22 years ago, the peso and the dollar traded at about parity. Today, the Argentine currency is, it'll cost you 167 of them to buy a dollar. Unemployment rate in Argentina, 7%. I don't know if these are true or not. These are what come off official sites. The year-over-year CPI inflation rate is 83%. And the latest number I saw was 7% per month. The interbank short-term interest rate is 75%. And over the last year, the money supply growth is 42%. Now, here's a snapshot of some information I gathered. The inflation problem in Argentina is obviously related to other issues that you were talking about, Eduardo. The Heritage Foundation rates a couple hundred countries on an index of economic freedom. And Argentina rates about 144 out of 177, which was actually worse than I thought it was going to be when I refreshed these numbers. Argentina's government, these scores are based on these criteria that you see here: property rights, government integrity, investment freedom, all these various indicators. And then the government, or then the Heritage Foundation rates these countries in categories called free, mostly free, moderately free, mostly unfree, and repressed. Argentina down here comes into the mostly unfree category, along with several of its Latin American neighbors. For context, Singapore is number 1 on their list, the most free. The United States of America is number 25, and countries like North Korea, Cuba, neighboring Bolivia, and so forth are in the repressed category. Venezuela's in there as well. So let's see here. And finally, the last thing Argentina does have the championship on sovereign defaults. This comes from an April 2020 Financial Times article just before Argentina defaulted for the 9th time on its sovereign debt. Argentina tends to borrow in dollars from foreign sources, and it is truly a serial default situation. People keep lending to them, institutions keep lending, because I think they have hope in the new government every time something changes. But the most recent default was 2020. 7 of these 9 defaults have happened in the last 70 years or so. So anyway, that's a snapshot, and it's not that I and Heritage are picking on Argentina in any way, but I think this tells us a lot about about what it gives you at least a statistical idea what it must be like living in Argentina. So I want to mention, I've read in several places that around the year 1900, economists were debating among themselves which country would be the richest in the next 100 years, Argentina or the United States. And I think that's amazing. Eduardo, do you agree with these numbers or this assessment, or what do you think? What's your reaction to that?
They are perfectly right. Those are the numbers. Since the creation of the central bank in Argentina, that was created in 1935, the average inflation rate was around 52.5% a year. So Argentinians got accustomed to live with inflation. And before that, before the creation of the central bank, with conservative governments and more rational governments, the average of Argentina's inflation was between 2.5 to 3% a year, what has been the case in the States, I think, the average. But yes, this is the 1 peso, to buy a dollar right now in the real market, not the fictional market that is being run by the government, where you see the dollar is 169, is 290 now, and probably the situation will deteriorate soon. So if you want to buy dollars, real dollar, the bill, you need to go to the black market, where everybody goes and is allowed because nobody's taking you to prison. You'll have to pay that. Yes, it's a complete disaster. The financial situation of Argentina has been a disaster for the last 90 years, probably, or 80 to 90 years. And of course, the causes are deeper. And I think that Maria can elaborate a little bit about that, and I can complement her. So go ahead, Maria. Why?
Before we do, that's the key question. Before we do, could I ask you, why does the government allow these various black markets in currency to happen? Is it because if they didn't, the wheels would literally come off what's left of the economy, or because they just can't enforce it? What do you think?
Well, Argentina is populated by Italians, Sicilians, and Turkish and Spaniards, and people, despite all the of course, they like paternalism behaviors and they like big government. In some ways, they are collectivists, but at the same time, they are very individualistic in some way. So they wouldn't allow the government to stop them from buying dollars if they want to see Argentina in the Qatar World Championship, they will find a way to travel there. So there is no way you can stop the middle class of Argentina to do some specific privileges like buying dollars. But the whole system is corrupted by intellectual causes, by I would say probably the church, those ideas that are going behind the philosophical approach, the ethical ideas in the Argentinian soul, and not just in Argentina. I would say that in all Latin America. The map you showed, Brazil right now, Lula won the election. Ecuador should be in green, because Ecuador is still a free country with a good president. And but if you compare, that's Ecuador is not in the right color. I would say that right now the only countries in South America that you could still trust are Uruguay and Ecuador. In Chile, you have Boric now. He's a socialist, almost a communist, that still looks moderated because he couldn't pass a communist constitution because the people rejected the new constitution he wanted to pass. But Chile is in the wrong path too. So the whole continent is being hurt by socialistic ideas. So the question should be why? Why there is no way, despite the fact that we see the economic failures all around, because you can compare Cuba, La Habana, and Miami, and you can compare North Korea and South Korea, and you can compare the development of Anglo-American countries like Canada, United States, or Australia, or New Zealand, and what we did in Latin America. And why are we still choosing to be socialistics? And that's the deep question, I think.
So you're saying you're making a direct connection between collectivism and its expression, socialism, and fiat money and unfree money. So I think that's a very important connection, because you almost always see these accompany each other. You always do. I won't say almost. You always do.
Let me tell you this. Which are the three forms to finance government expenditures? The first ones are taxes. So we had 167 taxes, including the income tax that was also established in 1933. And we have 167 countries, 7 taxes, sorry, that you need, you are always trying to figure out how to escape from them, because if you pay them all, you are broken. So that's the first thing. The second one is taking credits. The government indebted itself for years, as you see, and despite the fact that it's always defaulting, they find a way to convince the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the International Development Bank to keep lending them money. All the bureaucrats in Washington, they keep doing that. And of course, the Argentinian population pays the price, because that's a good way to avoid to change the structure, economic structure of the country. And the third, of course, they also borrow money from our own citizens. You see the Bank of Galicia that you were studying, they were full of government bonds. So, of course, they like that because they always find a way for the government to pay those bonds. So, in general, the bankers are pretty rich in Argentina. We call them empresarios instead of businessmen, because they find a way to make deals. And of course, when there is not enough, it's not enough, because credits and taxes are not enough for a big government that they always want to collect more money. They print money, and they nationalized the central bank in 1946. And it's the director of the central bank is a puppet. The administrative people there, they just obey orders. And if the government is telling you to print money just because they need to help the poor, or they need to give money to equality, of necessity creates rights, you have it. So
well, that's probably a really good segue for Maria. Would you like to comment on maybe some of the more fundamental? I suspect you talk about this on your speaking tour all the time. What do you think underlies this terrible abuse of people's wealth through money?
Well, you have a government that has so many roles that it shouldn't have. So you have a government almost in every aspect of your life. It's there, it's telling you how to live your life. And for being such a big government, it needs taxes. So we have governments that praise themselves to have been implemented the largest number of social plans, for example. So instead of seeing that as a failure, we didn't create a system that allow people to make money through their jobs. It's like, no, we are the governments that give more social plans to people, so people don't have to work to get money. And people don't ask themselves, well, where's that money coming from? Because it's not falling from the trees. So there's a lot of missing economic education from people. They don't understand exactly what is happening. And one of the important things here is when the prices go up because of inflation, instead of saying this is a problem of the government is issuing money and creating inflation, they put the guilt in the businessmen. So the businessmen are raising the prices, and they are not, I don't know, social interest in trying to make the country work. So there's many misconceptions. And the thing is, we have a pretty collectivist country and a region, as Eduardo said. It's a region that believes that in sacrifice, they believe that some came to life entitled to live just from the wealth that other people creates. We have a businessman that at the same time feels guilty. This reminds me of the sanction of the victim in Ayn Rand's ARCUK, but a lot of businessmen that feel guilty for making money, sometimes with reasons, because there's another thing. The only way to make money in Argentina, not the only way, but sometimes you need to deal with the government, because if not, you have no chance to survive in the long run because of so many taxes and because so many laws against, I don't know, free market, and you cannot comercializar, how do you say, to market and buy things from other countries. So there are so many rules against the businessman that they need that at the end to make some deals with the government. So I think part of this collectivism, part of this sacrifice, and the idea that your life do not belong to you. So in some way, there's some people who's going to take care of you, is the basic problem. Because if you think that when you're going to vote, you're going to vote for the government that will tell you, okay, don't worry about your life. You don't have to be responsible for your life. We will take care of you. And what they don't know is that for taking care of them, they have to take money from other people, from the real people who produce wealth. So they think they are entitled to that kind of life. There's a lot of people in Argentina who says, I'm getting too many social plans, I don't need to work anymore. And if you tell them, no, you have to work to pay for your life, they say, no, why? I'm entitled to have this. And they really think that. So when you need to change the philosophical ideas, you need to change the idea that your life belongs to you, that you're responsible for yourself, that you need to pay for the kind of life you want. And at the same time, you need to create the system that allows you to do that, because right now we are in a kind of a vicious circle. It's like, I think I'm not responsible for my life. I want someone else to take care of me. But at the same time, it's not a system that gives you chances and opportunities to become self-responsible, to become an entrepreneur. So it's kind of the opposite. So yeah, I think if we want to change the political and the economy, we need people to change the way to see the life and the way to see how to progress. And when they change that, they're going to start voting different. They are not going to vote for Cristina Kirchner or Fernandez or for Lula or for the corrupted guys that we have in government right now. They will want to vote for someone who says, okay, you have your life, we will let you free to do your own path. So we have to work there. So it's much more deeper the problem than just the economy.
Was there ever a ray of hope in your lifetime where things looked like they were getting better? I don't know anything about Argentine politics, but my impression was that under Carlos Menem, when we had these currency reforms, there was some effort in a positive direction. Am I correct or incorrect about that?
Carlos Menem, Eduardo, what do you think?
Yeah, did I say Eduardo? I'm sorry, Menem.
Okay. Menem was a Peronist, was a caudillo from the province of La Rioja in the north, with big, I don't know how you call it when you leave your beard to go until here.
Sideburns.
Sideburns, very, very large, like the old caudillos in the north of Argentina. He tried to be like Facundo Quiroga, who was a very bloody caudillo during 1820 and 1835, he finally was killed by another tyrant called Rosas, who, by the way, was the bloodiest dictator in all the history of Latin America. We should build a Netflix series with Juan Manuel de Rosas, who was a big criminal. He used to cut your hair and show it to the people during 20 years. The population of Buenos Aires had to escape and to find refuge in Montevideo. But Menem was a good man. He wanted to change despite of his aspect of caudillo, he wanted to change Argentina. He went to Syria and Lebanon because his parents were Syrians, and he was first generation in Argentina, to try to convince Middle East leaders with a very dubious reputation to give him money for his campaign. He won the election, in the internal election with the Peronist, and once he took power, instead of following all the collectivist ideas he was defending, he just changed. For some reasons, probably because after teaching free market economics and the philosophy of freedom, we started to become a little bit influential, especially in Buenos Aires, Cordoba, and Rosario, the big cities, and it's a very small but strong movement, libertarian movement arise. And he was a very smart guy. He knew that he could not keep going with paternalistic and socialist policies. So he approached us and convinced some of us, not me, but some other ones, of the idea of just implementing a free market reform. He addressed Domingo Cavallo. Domingo Cavallo was not a libertarian, was not a liberal, was a pro-free market, but a little bit of Keynesianism here and there. And he convinced him that there was no confidence in the Argentinian currency. So the only way to gain confidence and to increase the demand of money, so to diminish inflation, was to create a parity between the dollar and the peso. They went to Washington, they got a lot of dollars, and they kept it that way for a while. The first 3 years, they were very good. They privatized all the state-owned companies. They reduced tariffs. They modify a little bit labor laws, that they were fascist laws. They are still, but at that time they were a little bit more relaxed. And said just in 1 or 2 years, the economy started to grow fast. He attracted a lot of foreign investments and started to work. But in 1994, he wanted to be re-elected in a country and first he won the first re-election, and he was allowed to do that, but he wanted another re-election, and he tried to convince Mr. Alfonsín. He coming to power in 1990. He ended his first presidency in 1994, and he wanted to be re-elected. So he signed an agreement with Alfonsín from the Radical Party, but in order to be able to be re-elected, he allowed the Radical Party to expand expenditures again. And because of the parity, $1, 1 peso, he went abroad again and took a lot of credit and kept spending. And that was the cause of the final default in 2002. He was accumulating debt until in 2002, the American government says, we are not going to rescue anymore, to the new government that was De La Rúa. So just if you go to a default, just go, because you didn't, finally, you didn't make the necessary reforms that were needed to do. So, but again, if you try to understand why he didn't do it, it's because of, in Latin America, you don't have the American sense of life. You don't have that. Regrettably, the idea of individualism, the idea of just you are the owner of your own destiny and that you need to go for it, is not there. You still have the paternalistic attitude. And finally, when you don't have the values, the proper values, society gives up and finally fails. So that is the reason. So the constant of inflation, once you liberated the tiger again, and the central bank started to issue and print money, what you see is the astronomical phenomenon that you see now. We have an inflation rate of 100%. Argentina is going to explode again. And the only thing that keeps us with some hope and give us some hope for the future is that the libertarian ideas enter into the population. And right now we have several political parties that they are more moderate, that they understand better the problem. They understand that we need to shrink the government, the size of the government. We need to spend less. Argentina the government is spending between 45 to 50% of the gross national product expenditures of the government. They are taking almost half of the production of the country for bureaucrats. And of course, they spend that money becoming themselves rich and not giving no services at all. So unless we change that and we reduce again government spending to 20%, to 10% of the gross national product, we will not have any future. So let's see if we can do it.
Yeah.
And,
so
if the population.
If I may, I'd like to pivot to a slightly different question, because you both are underlying or outlining the need for deep philosophical change and for a principled change in the approach to government and the approach to money. But in the meantime, there are tens of millions of Argentinians who need to survive. So I'd like to spend a few minutes on asking you how you do that. And I'm kicking that off with a graph of an index of the Buenos Aires Merval. It's a broad index of stocks, and you can see it goes vertical. Well, obviously, we'll all know that reflects highly inflated currency, highly diminished purchasing power. But my question is, does that adequately guard for you? Can you shelter your wealth by putting it into Argentine publicly traded stocks?
I would say that unless you know the gossiping in the stock exchange and the relationship between any of those firms that are just in the stock exchange of Buenos Aires and the government, is very difficult to foresee what is going to happen with them. They are experts in protecting themselves against inflation and because they have been developing those skills for years. So they
can we talk about that? Because we know that Argentine companies, they make automobiles, for example, for international export, and there's so much. It's such a rich country agriculturally. There's lots of beef exports and grain exports and so forth. How do producers in Argentina function? Do they only function with dollars and then convert and pay their help and make their capital investments in pesos? How do they function in a situation like this?
The whole agricultural sector is being penalized for being successful. The Pampas, the province of Buenos Aires, the province of Córdoba, the province of Santa Fe, are probably with some of the Ukrainian lands,
right.
Some of the most fertile places on the earth to grow grains. So they are in Argentina in general. They export. They could feed 400 million inhabitants, but instead they are feeding 100, 120, 130 250. They export well, but instead of getting 290 pesos per dollar they export, the government is penalizing them with the tax to exports. That's probably one of the few countries in the world with that kind of tax, and they give them for each dollar they export only. I think that is probably right now the retenciones are around, I think they are 35% of the official dollar. So the official dollar is 169. Let's put it 170. But instead of giving them the 170, that of course is a robbery, because the real price is 290, they are getting 170. But on that, they charge them with 35%. So you need to reduce 170 less 35%, and the rest you have to pay income tax and some other agricultural taxes and local taxes. So what they get for their grains is a very low percentage of the real price in the market. So it's a miracle the way the Argentinian agriculture survives. That's why a lot of the producers emigrated to Uruguay, whose, its land is full of rocks. We have 20 meters of humus in the Pampas, but in Uruguay you have rocks. But Uruguay is being very, very efficient. They moved to Paraguay, they moved to the south of Brazil. They always find a way to survive. And out of Argentina, you have $400 billion waiting to be reinvested in the country once the conditions improved. Why? Because the Argentinians always find a way. We are, as I mentioned, Italians, Sicilians, Turkish, we know how to deal with money and how to escape from the government grip. But this is not a very efficient system, People finally get tired, they try to emigrate, they go to Miami, but you find a way, you survive.
So how else, from a practical standpoint, if Maria, before the show, you and I were speaking that you return to Buenos Aires every 3 months, and looks like the prices in the supermarket have doubled. So how do you save? How do you hold your wealth? The conceptual ways come to my mind. So hopefully you buy a home, you buy some real estate, maybe you hold jewelry. What do you do? Do you see Maria, in your travels to the USA and say your travels back to Argentina, differences in the way people approach wealth and money just because of the inflation?
Well, yes, what I was telling you before is I come back to it now. Right now I'm living in Chicago, and I come back to Argentina between 3 and 6 months, because I have my oldest kid there, and not kid anymore, but my boy, my son. And I go every time to the same supermarket, and it's amazing for me how I buy the same amount of things, but I pay double every 3 or 4 months that I'm coming back. So I said, what is happening here? And it's exactly that. It's inflation. I think what people do is they don't believe in Argentinian pesos anymore. So the way to save their money is buying things, or buying dollars for sure, or buying gold, or trying to invest their money in real estate or whatever. There's a lot of Argentinians with money that they are investing in real estate in Miami, for example, in the United States. But they don't want to stay with the pesos, because they know that 3 months later they are going to be able to buy the half of the stuff that they could buy today.
Yeah, that capital flight to Miami doesn't do much good for the development of industry and jobs and prosperity in Argentina, I guess, though, does it? I mean, it's
no, but people,
it's what they have to do, but I mean, it's a shame. So
and the other thing is that you cannot project almost anything. So, for example, I was telling you before, I was organizing a conference in Argentina, and I have to pay for the menu, I have to pay for the I don't know, for the catering, and I have to pay for the technology. But if I pay with my American credit card, I will have to pay double, because it's going to become the official dollar. So sometimes when you think of, so maybe I should bring dollars to Argentina, change it in what we call the blue market. It's not the black market, but it's the same, and pay for the things with that money, because it's going to be much less expensive than if I pay with a credit card. So there's no way that you can project that. You have always, you will need to think all the time, how do I do this to be more effective and to spend less money? So half of your mind is thinking about that, instead of thinking how to do the things better, or to how to create more. And so how to, in some way, you think how to survive.
Yeah, that's very well put. The time has gone so fast here. I want to, I have many more questions myself, but I want to open it to the people in the audience. I'm sure there are some questions, and if they're not, I'll be happy to continue with you. But Daniel, do you have some questions for our inflation experts here?
We have no questions from the chat, but actually I had a question personally.
Yeah.
And that would be, what would be your one advice you could give to an average Argentinian to handle this inflation, or to help them live? Or is it just, try to move out? Or can you still live in Argentina and is there something really good that you can tell them?
Great question.
Well, if I go first, Argentina is still a nice place to live, especially if you find a way to protect your income, getting some dollars. And if you need to buy a house and the price of your apartment is $300,000, you need to pay cash. So you need to go with $300,000 to a bank, or to un escribano, I don't know how you say that, a notarius, where you take all the money in a big bag. You don't tell anybody that you are going to buy the property, because you are risking somebody can steal you. But that shows that it's almost impossible. You don't have loans, you don't have credits. There is no way you can buy a house in 30 years with allowance the way you do it in the States. No. The interest rate right now is around 80% a year. So there is no way for a poor person to buy some land in allowance, as it used to be in Argentina at the beginning of the last century. So there is no way that you really can have access to your own house. So shiny towns are growing up fast, villas miserias. So that's the kind of spectrum you are seeing in all Latin America. To protect yourself, what do? Of course, the speed of circulation of money is increasing. That means that what you have is the demand for money is lowering, prices go up and up and up. And instead of just shorting and cutting the printing of money, the government is still printing more money. So it's going to be a fire. Everybody knows that. And this government is trying to survive until next year to see if they can end the presidency before a big boom, a big bomb just blow up everything. So what you do is you don't keep your pesos because they are just deteriorating every second. You go to the supermarket, you buy as much as you can, and sometimes the price of to build the house, the materials change so dramatically that you can change it. The price can go from $500 a square meter to $1,500 in just 1 month. So a big movement of assets is taking place because of inflation. And I think that one of the reasons why inflation is being so popular, because it's a redistribution of wealth. Who is losing wealth? Of course, all the people with fixed amount of money, the jubilados, the retirees, the people who is getting a salary, and they suffer 10% a month of losing money because when they go to buy things, things went up 10%. Who are the ones profiting from this situation? Of course, the people who are printing the money, the politicians, the empresarios that are approaching the government are the first one to getting all the money. So what is pretty popular because of that. The bankers are getting, right now, they are buying LELIQs, is special bond issued by the central bank, because the government is printing so much money that the central bank has to absorb that quantity of money that was already printed by the central bank, issuing a special bond called LELIQs. The amount of LELIQs is a big bomb. It duplicates the money supply, M1. So everybody knows that the government, there is no way that the government will be able to pay those bonds in the near future. No. And they are trying to renovate all the LELIQs. But how long can a situation like that stay? It's going to explode. So we don't know, maybe after the World Cup. Right now, everybody's trying to just reach the World Cup because the public is going to be just watching TV, Messi, how he plays soccer. But after that, January and February, I think the situation is going to become worse and worse before the election. The election will be next November 2023. And of course, all the polls show that the government has deteriorated the image, and the libertarian parties have very good chances to win the election. If they will have the courage to change anything in Argentina, let us see. We have been training the public, Maria, myself, and several liberal institutions in Argentina for decades. We have been teaching free market economics. Ludwig von Mises is a very popular man now because of Maria. Ayn Rand is very well known now. Everybody knows Francisco d'Anconia and Hank Rearden and John Galt. And so in Buenos Aires, there is a very, very spread out message about the importance of changing the way you think. But there is still big quantity of people in the country, especially in the north part of the country, that are still very, very tribal. They believe in big government, they believe in collectivism. So let's see, the country is divided into 50 and 50, like in Brazil. You see Lula got 51 and Bolsonaro 49. So there is part of the country, the productive part of the country, the industrious part of the country that got 49, the other one 51. But once they are in power, they start to really push all the Foro de Sao Paulo ideology that destroys the productive part of Latin America. That's why it's so important to fight for ideas and to explain massively the public how they are going to be, how they are being estafados. I don't know how you say that, Maria.
Screwed.
Screwed. Too.
That's a technical economics term.
Screwed. That's perfectly. If I may add something else. One of the things that is happening a lot is that young people they're staying in Argentina, but they start to work because of technology and the possibilities that the internet has given us. They are starting to work for American companies or for European companies from Argentina. So that's a good way to protect yourself, because you're earning in dollars or you're earning in euros, but you have the living cost of Argentina. So the problem of living in Argentina, if your salary is in Argentinian pesos, but if you can earn in dollars and you pay the rents, for example, for an apartment are much cheaper than in US. So many young people who are more professional in working with the internet, and so they are doing that, and that's a good way to protect themselves. So it's not it's not the solution, but at least they can survive and they can protect themselves. Yeah,
and it emphasizes the point that Eduardo was making before, that under inflation, the people who are harmed the most are the people who have to depend on the currency. The people at the hardworking people at the bottom of the economic scale have almost no. This inhibits their ability to move up tremendously. it just suppresses them in a terrible way. And I wanted to point out that, we're talking about, for example, young people and companies that want to they need to do business in dollars just to have some stability. Well, what happens if the dollar becomes unstable? Or what happens if we get tremendous inflation in the USA? And we're starting to see big inflation, or the results of big inflation, the results of money printing, frankly, it's rampant. I don't think we're going to get quite to this state, but it's very damaging. We can see the damage here. And I just want to say it could happen here. So I think you two are a very good cautionary tale to citizens of countries that have not experienced this kind of terrible monetary debasement. We can take a few more minutes. Daniel's given me a little bit of extra time here. So please go ahead, Eduardo.
I just wanted to say that right now, the government is running out of dollars. The central bank only have $4 billion to sell to the, if you want to import goods, and most of Argentinian industry, because it's artificial, because instead of being created by the markets, they have been created by government protection, they need to import a lot of raw materials from abroad. And the government was selling the dollars at the official rate. So they were benefiting a lot because they are buying dollars for 169 pesos and selling goods at the market price that is more than 300. So right now, because of the lack of dollars, they need to go to the black market and buy the dollars to import. But that's another difficult task to do in a large scale. So right now, a lot of industries like the automotive industry are suffering because they are not being able to import very important raw materials for their production. So you see some industries producing at the scale of 60, 70, 50% of their capacities because there are not enough import machinery or artifacts that they need to produce. That's a difficult task. Another way Argentinians have protected their assets also buying real estate. Around Buenos Aires, you have 300 golf courses, polo courses, and houses. And so middle class, the high middle class, found a way to protect themselves, just investing and in beautiful places. That's why if you go to Argentina, you will be very spoiled and you'll have a good time because still middle class is strong. The problem is with the people who is suffering with the fixed salary and just they see their situation deteriorated. Middle class is shrinking little by little, and that's the most important asset is in our middle class. So we hope to reverse that, because if not, we don't have a future.
All right, I want to, we need to close here. And in closing, I want to give each of you an opportunity, and I wish I'd had you give me a slide I could put up, but we can do it verbally. Can you tell the audience how they can listen to your work or follow your work? I know a lot of it is in the Spanish language, but Maria, can you tell us how to follow your work?
I would suggest people to go to our YouTube channel. It's Ayn Rand Center Latam or Ayn Rand Center Latin America. And we have a lot of material there in English too, because all the conference that we do in Argentina, Brazil, and now in Costa Rica and Mexico, a lot of ARI intellectuals are coming, and we have a lot of content in English, interviews with them. So they will find many content in English. So that's not a problem. And for those who speak Spanish or they want to practice their Spanish, we have a lot of good material also with Gloria Alvarez, who is a very popular person here in Latin America, and she's trying to spread good ideas and free market economics, and with Agustina Vergara Cid, who works also in Ayn Rand Institute. So I would suggest people to go to our YouTube channel, Ayn Rand Center Latin America, and we are also in Facebook, and we are also in Instagram and Twitter. So they will find.
So if they look up, rather than give handles, they look up Maria Marty or ARI Latam, is that where they'll find you on Facebook and Twitter? And
Ayn Rand Center Latin America.
Ayn
Yes,
Rand
Ayn Rand
Center
Center
Latin
Latin America, or Maria Marty, yes, with white, they will find me and they will find the center.
Okay, good. And Eduardo.
Eduardo, this is me. You can
Oh, okay. No, hold it up for a long time. So it'll last through the we can't see it. A little higher.
Yeah, you have to go up.
Higher.
More.
Okay.
Here.
Hold it up. Good. Give us a good 10 seconds there. Okay.
Yes. freelatam.org. Yes.
Exactly.
I'm going to go back and take a screenshot of that when I go back and review this. Yeah.
Let me tell you that my main product, I have two products in this new foundation. One is that my free market economic course is a kind of free to choose course for Latin Americas. Is well done and well developed, short videos, 6 minutes, and it's translated into Spanish. So I'm using it to teach Latin Americans how free markets work. So you have theories of value, you have prices and the importance of free prices, the theory of monopoly by Murray Rothbard, you have money and banking, and you have interest rates, you have economic cycles, labor problems, fiscal problems, free trade, and economic myth related to free trade. So that's the content of that course that I find it. I worked for 2 years with Friedrich Naumann Foundation, a German foundation, to have this course ready. And my second activity is a club called Read to Lead. What we do there is we get people together during one morning to discuss issues that they have to read in advance. And we have a guest speaker, one of the best intellectuals in the world, to give us a lecture. We had several ones this year. And after that, we have a lunch. And we hope to be able to invite you to Buenos Aires to give us some financial advice on how to invest in the stock exchange of Buenos Aires. No, in the stock exchange of New York. So come to Buenos Aires and teach us.
Okay, great. All right, I'll take the last word here. And thank you very much. Here's how you can find me, my usual ending. I'm on Hard Money Jim on Substack. Not very active on Twitter, but you can find me. Just had an essay published in Capitalism Magazine, Money Creation Then and Now, which will give you some surprising ideas on surprising information on how money is created and how similar it is to the way it was under a gold standard, and yet how different, how completely different in many ways. All right. Thank you both very much. This has been one of the most fun interviews I've ever done, and especially nice to catch up with you, Maria, and nice to meet you, Eduardo. It's a real pleasure. So thanks, everyone. We will, and I hope to have you back both sometime.
It was a pleasure, and yeah, I think there's a lot of things to do in Argentina and Latin America still, but we are doing it. So again, it's one mind at a time. We have to give them economic education, but mostly philosophical education. And well, we hope to see results in, I don't know, 2, 3 years, 10 years, I don't know, but we need to start the battle right now. Yeah.
Faster, please. Faster, please.
We'll try.
No, I know it's a long journey.
We're doing our best. Thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you both. All right.
How can you stand that cold?
Sorry?
How can you stand that cold?
I have a nice warm office. Plus, in a couple of weeks, I'm heading for Southern California. So don't worry. I'm fine.
Okay. Bye-bye. Ciao. Ciao, Maria.
See you.